Hello and welcome to another Drive With Me conversation. Today I actually wanted to try to slow down a little bit, and it might get a little dark, maybe a little optimistic by the end, at least that's what I'm hoping. But I want to talk about where it feels like we are at, primarily here in the United States, and as a middle class, working class person, maybe even lower middle class person in all honesty, and how the reality of 2026 and the 2020s increasingly in general compare to where we've been, and kind of by extension where we seem to be going, where we're likely to be going. So I wanted to start off with one of my favorite industries. It's a hobby industry, right? And I've talked about it a number of times on here, and that is video gaming. I have been rather disappointed with many of the decisions made and just the realities of the industry notably since 2023. There have been a lot of layoffs and major studio closures and major studio spin-offs and so on. And a lot of that seemed to stem from the impact and the fallout from 2020 and COVID, and how that changed things both permanently and temporarily. And that will likely be kind of a recurring theme here, is how much COVID led to changes in our society that we still really don't seem to have bounced back from. And in many cases, we seem to have collectively learned many of the wrong lessons from COVID. Yet it was also predictable. So here in 2026, like 6 years on from the COVID pandemic, you have this AI bubble that is causing a huge spike in demand for memory chips, and that is, as our relatively underregulated technology sector here in modern American-led capitalism has bred, huge cost spikes for everyone. And in some cases, it's even impacting the same company, right? So, like, for example, Microsoft, their AI division has huge demand for memory units, and it's hurting the prices of, like, their Xbox division, for example. So sometimes it even overlaps. Like, Google is kind of in the same boat, where I believe they have DeepMind, but the Google AI sector, right, that portion of the company is helping actively hurt their, like, cell phone division and their like Google Pixel line and that sort of thing, and their Chromebooks and any other hardware that they make, and even just the nature of increased difficulty and lower revenues coming in from licensing Android. More, it would be my understanding anyway. So that's all impacted by this just raw, huge demand, and functionally the industry has the majority of memory, like NAND chips, are produced by three companies. It's Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. And they're just loving this. They're apparently acting with a level of disregard and kind of take it or leave it attitude that is really unprecedented. And it's leading to even this whole situation and these companies being known as the RAM cartel. And in the United States, the regulatory environment is such that it's unlikely to touch anything. They're going to just push for additional supply, make additional supply, build out additional fabs. That's it. There's nothing we can do about it otherwise. And that impacts a variety of industries. Even things like the Activision Blizzard King acquisition that Microsoft underwent was an example of one that was overall seemed to have damaged the industry and was really predictably going to do so. And yet it still went through even during a Democratic administration under Biden. And that is supposedly more regulatory focused and less favorable towards big business. It still happened. Because the reality of our neoliberal world and America, the modern US, is that we are and have become increasingly pro-corporate and pro-greed, pro-short-sighted thinking, pro-investor over like stakeholder and over people and over citizens, and that is very likely to continue. And so you see that spillover effect into other industries, not only as food and clothing and housing and rent and electricity and so many of these other things increasingly consolidating and monopolized and expensive, while often producing worse value or providing worse services over time. It's now even spreading to hobby industries pretty strongly, like video games. And you see that notably with Sony. A little bit of anti-consumer practices with Nintendo, and they've been doing a lot of legal stuff in the background for a while. But now Sony's up in their game, and Microsoft has been kind of a mess for a while. And it sounds like under Phil Spencer and now under Ashish Sharma, Microsoft is trying to like right the ship and develop some kind of cohesive strategy, but it doesn't seem incredibly clear what that even means, because now the Xbox brand is committed to being both console and PC and cloud at a minimum, and has put a lot of its eggs in the Game Pass basket. And so while it's backing up and seems to be reclaiming some of its exclusive titles and is trimming, a lot of the less profitable sections of the companies, particularly like development studios and so on, I strongly suspect, as many others do, and as rumors would suggest, that the next Xbox console is actually going to be a PC hybrid, and there's going to be an increased focus on the storefront, on going more or less all digital. Wouldn't surprise me at all if this next device doesn't even have a disk drive. And I think that's where we're moving. You have Steam. As much as I like Steam and I like the open platform that is PC, I really like Valve generally as a company. They're privately owned too, so that's part of it. Like, it's not that Gabe Newell, who the founder and leader of Valve, doesn't mean he can't be out of touch. He posted a picture recently of him like playing on, I believe it was a Steam Deck on a yacht, right? So I mean, like, a billionaire out of touch kind of nonsense. But in regards, like, and in comparison, right, to others of that stature, Valve is still one of the best out there, which is kind of disappointing that this is what we have to choose from. But Steam is like the lesser of the evils, if you will, which is why in my kind of video game experience over time, I find myself getting increasingly drawn to primarily gaming on PC and on Steam. And maybe even Steam devices, especially if the prices come back down. Because I know the Steam machine is expected to start at like $1,050 or something like that. And that's a concern for what is kind of an underpowered mid-level PC. Paying $1,000 for that is ridiculous. I already have a laptop, an MSI Cyborg, that seems, as far as I can tell, more powerful than that, and I paid $1,300 for it. And have Windows, and it is like a substantial step up in terms of power. And it comes with like a screen and a trackpad and so on. So a keyboard, right? And the Steam machine just comes with the little cube, right? So while it seems cool, the price to value ratio is just not quite there for me. And probably not a lot of others. At that range, it's probably priced out of the like primary consumer market. Like the Steam Deck even saw price increases recently, and I believe the base level model is like $750 or something like that now, if I understood correctly. So, and now you're talking the least expensive PlayStation, I believe, is as of August is going to be what, $600 or $650. The least expensive Xbox, I believe, is the Series S. That is the less powerful one. I believe that's retailing for is about to retail for around $500, which is freaking crazy. This is just, these kind of price increases have never been seen in this industry before. AI is not providing the kind of value to offset these kind of prices. It just isn't there. And in fact, a lot of the AI slop and nonsense that we're seeing throughout the internet is really just showing how rudimentary and shallow this technology is. It's not real. It's not nearly as transformative, as far as I can tell, as these AI CEOs and many of these tech, acolytes would have us believe. So Sony doing things like going all digital, closing down the PS3 and Vita stores, um, increasingly ratcheting up the cost of Crunchyroll and the required tiers to be able to access their store, and then even what's on their store, and so on. After having consolidated many of the disc manufacturers and anime studios, and they consolidated a lot of intellectual property, they're now really trying to squeeze it. Disney was doing this and has been doing this since a minimum of COVID. Like, since Disney Plus launched, they've done a lot with raising prices and giving us, as far as I'm concerned, less value for your money at their theme parks and their cruises and so on. Like, you see this time after time in industry after industry. When eggs go up due to avian flu, all egg producers raise their prices. When ram demand starts going up, all three of them raise their prices dramatically. And the reports are that they refuse to sign contracts. They're going month to month, raise prices over month. And if even larger companies tend to call and say they want to order, basically the Micron or SK Hynix or Samsung offers them a price, and if they don't take it. These large companies that are trying to make the orders, they'll just get ghosted. They're like, yeah, we'll just go to somebody else. So this it's indicative of kind of how humanity has been. And the reality is like, I grew up with gaming. My original first console ever, first video game experience was on an original Nintendo back in the early 90s. It was older then, and in fact the Super Nintendo had just launched, but the original Nintendo was discounted, so that's what my parents got me. And so that's what I initially grew up playing, and then eventually moved to Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and then the GameCube. And then around that time, the sixth generation of consoles was when I was hitting my teenage years, and I was more interested and willing to expand. And so while I got a Wii and Wii U and Switch and now Switch 2, Nintendo has, since the GameCube, the early GameCube days, has not been my primary console, and the number of games that I invest in for the Nintendo systems has been notably less. It's basically dwindled down to almost exclusively Nintendo first-party titles that I'm interested in. And then Microsoft was kind of the next step, right? So I moved to the original Xbox. I really loved Halo. I enjoyed the PlayStation 2, but I had so many friends with it that I opted to just get an Xbox because I was such a fan of Halo and I was really into shooters at that time. And the industry was changing rapidly, and that was where I wanted to be. So I got an original Xbox. Towards the tail end of the generation, I finally picked up a PS2 and was able to start a bit of a collection. But that was the first time that I was really going multi-platform, and I loved it. But Xbox was my main console by the end of the sixth generation. Moving into the seventh, Xbox 360 was pretty much my ride or die the whole time. I got a Wii, but that was mostly a family console, and something that my siblings actually pushed for even more than I did, to kind of go in on it together one Christmas. And the PlayStation 3 I finally picked up at the very tail end of the generation, like 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And again, pretty much just got a bunch of first-party titles, a bunch of PS2 collections, that completed games and sets that I hadn't collected before, and it was nice to get them on Blu-ray together on single discs and on a new generation of hardware, and often up-resed and so on. So I got like the Sly Cooper collection and the Ratchet and Clank collection and Metal Gear Solid and all sorts of stuff, like the Tomb Raider collection, things like that, right? It's pretty awesome, actually. I really enjoyed my PS3, but again, that was more of a niche product, right? That was something I got for a specific purpose after its price had come down pretty dramatically. And I did the same thing, similar with the Wii. And Microsoft was my primary console. Then Microsoft went and did some dumb stuff, as almost everybody will know by now, if you're involved in the industry, around 2013 with the Xbox One. And myself and many others kind of jumped ship on Microsoft and went to the PlayStation 4. So then for the 8th generation, the PS4 was my primary console, and I got an Xbox One and still got a Wii U and then a Switch. over the course of the 8th generation of consoles, but they were, once again, they were like for specific purposes. And my Xbox One, basically by the end of the generation, was pretty much just a Game Pass machine, and my Wii U and then Switch were pretty much just for first party titles from Nintendo, and then my PlayStation 4 was where I had the large library. PlayStation 5 has largely had the same experience as the PS4, where I have a Series X and S, I have a Switch 2, but those consoles are mostly for Game Pass and Nintendo first party titles respectively, and then the PlayStation 5 has been where I really collect my games that are third party, and in addition to the Sony first party stuff. Now with these moves, it's not that I made, just like when I was kind of done with Nintendo and irritated with Microsoft, I didn't stop buying their consoles and stop buying games, but I did change my habits and definitely gave them less money compared to prior generations. I think and suspect strongly that's where I'm at now with PlayStation, and that once, if they actually fully pull this trigger in 2028 and stop producing discs and really just have a closed garden system where the only way I can buy first party PlayStation games moving forward is via their digital storefront, where they have absolutely no motivation or very little motivation to meaningfully drop the price or produce sales at all, I may, if the price is right, and once they get enough good exclusive games, may still, kind of like with the PlayStation 3 and the 2 and the Xbox One and Nintendo consoles since the Wii, may very well grab it at a certain point towards the end of its life cycle and collect some of its first party games. But I will not be giving PlayStation and Sony the kind of money that they had before. That said, it doesn't look like they really care. My understanding is the PlayStation 5 has been the most successful console by such a margin that, in fact, Sony has profited more from the PlayStation 5 generation than they did the previous four combined, which is pretty massive. So their digital only future, I think, is so advantageous for them that they don't seem to care if they lose gamers like me. All right? So I acknowledge that. I am under no delusion that me stating this is going to have some kind of major impact, but it has been a little bit combined with everything else. This AI bubble is what I suspect is a bubble. This overall cost of living increase, this overall era of increased and kind of open-faced greed and short-sightedness and overt focus on shareholders over any kind of long-term value and moving quarter to quarter, as opposed to like thinking long-term about the value of a company and a nation and so on. I think it makes it even that much more frustrating for me, and that much more honestly glad that a company like Valve and Steam exist, and that Microsoft, I think, has taken such a beating over the last close to 15 years now, that it's changing its ways and hopefully is not only becoming leaner and so on, but hopefully starts becoming more of a boon to the industry again. And I actually think it's a good thing if they pivot towards a more of a PC hybrid kind of system and move towards, like, honestly, like them moving towards digital makes sense. Steam staying digital 100% makes sense. It is not digital inherently that I have a problem with. It is how they're going about it. And as long as there's the opportunity for competition, there's the opportunity to install other operating systems, there's the opportunity to go to GOG or to the Epic Store or the Microsoft Store or what have you, that's valid. That's okay, and I like that, especially if we're continuing to strengthen the features that are on these platforms and strengthen digital rights ownership, with the understanding that we always have emulation and frankly ripping our own games to like digital copies that we can own that are DRM free and or piracy if we need to. I really don't. I not only see that not as a problem, I see that as the natural solution to these things. I grew up in the age of Napster and LimeWire and stuff, right? So like, to me, if a company does not produce an easy way or a fair way of owning your content, as far as I'm concerned, if buying is not ownership, then piracy is not true theft. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a way of, it's preservation, is how I see it. It's a way of building up your library in a way that the company can't stop. And increasingly I feel that way about a number of things, including like food. My wife and I are really getting into gardening, and I want to get better at that and expand that. I'm particularly getting into heirloom varieties of things that like tomatoes and onions and so on, that we squash and all sorts of different stuff that we often use. And then I would like to move more towards like growing eventually our own like wheat and our own produce our own protein, whether it be rabbits or chickens or what have you, as an example, which is, I realize, is a very different subject from video games, but the core concept becomes the same. The value proposition of modern food, the nutrition and value and what you get for what the price that you pay, and the damage to the economy or the environment and so on, the way that they go about producing this food, I think is really starting to skew in favor of we should be growing our own like victory gardens, like the American people were encouraged to do during World War I and World War II. We should be growing more of our own food. Not that we ever need to be self-sufficient entirely on our own. In fact, I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think we should try to reintegrate into more of a community mindset, and help each other. So if you know that your neighbor is producing a bunch of strawberries, then maybe you emphasize something else as an example, right? However, I think that same kind of idea of we need to be more ruthless about ensuring we have a good value proposition in all things that we purchase is becoming more important than it has in a long time, because prices are going up all around us while wages are truly not keeping up. And gaming is one of those things that we don't need to do. It is fun, I enjoy it, but I have a several-year-old PC, and I will try to keep that running as long as possible. I have a PlayStation 5 and a Switch 2 and an Xbox Series X that I bought all at their original price points at, like for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X for $500 respectively. The Switch 2 was $450 because I got the Mario Kart World Bundle, and that, which is ridiculous. I was not going to pay $80 for that game. There's no friggin' way I was going to do that. That's an example of like, even if the game is good, it's not worth $80, not in a world where we have other options, right? And sometimes these companies need to be kind of reminded of that. So I don't think I'm going to hurt Sony by being disappointed with them, just like I don't think I meaningfully hurt Nintendo or Microsoft by being disappointed with them. But if enough of us are, it will change. And I think we're increasingly living in a world wherein consumer protest is meaning less and less and impacting them less and less. But I think we still have a strong voice, especially in unison. I think it just takes more of us now than it used to. So more than anything, I'm hoping this gets us to think increasingly about being more self-sufficient, being more willing to put effort into things that give us more value and return that as much of that value of our labor and our time and our expertise back into us, into our families, instead of some corporation collecting it, right? Whether that means working for yourself, starting your own business, becoming self-employed, starting your own garden, sewing your own, or fixing, at the very least, repairing your own clothes, even if you're not making them yourself, right? Things that our grandparents and great-grandparents would have had the skill set to do and would have just been a part of survival, we are now being taken advantage of because we cannot do them, right? And so I think it's important to try to reclaim much of our sovereignty, and by extension we can bring prices down because we won't have the same reliance on them. And then if enough of us do that, prices will come down anyway because there won't be the same demand. Capitalists, those that benefit the most from capitalism, love to tell us that it's all a supply and demand issue, and there's the invisible hand of the market. It will do what it does, and people are paid what they're worth, and a lot of these other lies that are only partially true. And only true if we allow them to be true, because it disproportionately benefits those that control the means of production, that control manufacturing, that control platforms, etc., right? So it's funny how those are the people that tell us that, oh, we can't do anything, that we shouldn't do anything, like morally it's wrong because this is what has to happen, but we also are not going to pay you what you're worth, or even just substantially more, and you got a problem with it, tough titties, it is what it is. And also your rent's going up by another, several $100s. So cheers, mate. Right? And like, that's just how the world's been working for a long time. And because there hasn't been a whole lot of meaningful pushback, it just keeps happening. But things are going to change one way or another. That is inevitable. I am a hobbyist student of history, and one thing that I've seen time and time again is that even in a post-industrial era, it can extend the timeline. It gives you more wiggle room because of increased production and so on. And now we've financialized our system, so we have even more wiggle room. We have more debt and more just bandwidth to play with, frankly. But the reality is, no system that is focused on greed lasts forever. And every system, every single nation state, every single empire, every single entity that has ever existed, created and built by humans, which is all of them up to this point that I am aware of, all of them have collapsed due to misallocation of resources of a variety of kinds, whether it be due to war, pestilence, plague, war, invasion, etc. Sometimes just straight up collapsing from within, often a combination of factors. Almost every time, people could have survived those respective things if they had planned better, if they had been looking out for their people, if they had been spreading power and wealth and resources out more. But they don't, because we humans are generally short-sighted creatures, and we're doing it again. So while we have more bandwidth than past civilizations may have had, we're falling into the same traps, and it will eventually bite us in the ass. And when every time we have a major recession, that's partially what it is. I know they just call it a reset, or a change in the business cycle, or a natural part, a correction in the market, etc. But it's funny how often those corrections hurt working and middle class people, while those that are wealthy benefit majorly. They come out of it with notably more wealth than they had before it, even if they lose it initially quite a bit disproportionately at the beginning, which is what often happens when the market tanks. They almost always come out of it better on the other side, because they are the ones gaming the system. But you can only do that for so long. And we're already getting to a point where an increased percentage of investment in the American stock market, the New York Stock Exchange, is coming from foreign companies and foreign nations, right? We're already not really supporting our own weight here as Americans and in the American market. As that continues to shift, as our currency, the American dollar, continues to devalue, as the cost of living continues to increase, as wages continue to stay low, as labor representation and organized collective bargaining continues to remain weak, we will suffer increasingly, and things will get increasingly difficult until something happens that causes enough of us to be upset and angry enough to be willing to do something about it. And we will rediscover just how fierce we can be. I don't know where that point is. I don't know what that looks like. I don't think anybody does. But it will happen because it's inevitable. That's one of the few historical constants in human existence, is that this will collapse and change at some point. And it will hurt a lot of people in the process. And there will be anger, and there will be disgust, and there will be people losing their lives over the mismanagement of our resources. So we need to try to be aware of this, wake up as early as possible, protect ourselves and those closest to us, and then try to advocate for positive change that benefits as many of us as possible, because that's how we stabilize our systems. Is by spreading out power, spreading out wealth, spreading out resources. Doesn't mean we have to call it socialism or do it via socialism, wherein there's public ownership of the means of production completely. There are various ways to do it, and there's a whole lot of different historical examples out there. But we need to do better, regardless of what we end up specifically doing or calling it. Those principles need to start being applied to a greater degree. So anyway, I'll get off of my soapbox for now. So I appreciate, if you made it this far, good for you. I appreciate it. Please feel free to like the video if you did. And if you want to hear more about politics, culture, current events, technology, etc., please stick around, because we'll definitely be talking more about it. All right, y'all. Have a good one. Later.